Welcome to today's Safety Connection, Health and Safety in the Agricultural Sector. We are so glad to have you within this session today. On behalf of Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, WSPS, it is my pleasure to be one of the facilitators for this session, along with Suzanne Thornham from the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, or MLI-TSD. You will note in the chat that we do have contact information for both the ministry and WSPS, including my specific contact information. We will talk a little further about the information that we will provide not only within the session, but as follow-up to the session, including that same contact information. That said, I invite you to take that down from the chat. To begin, and better understand those who are participants within our events, such as Safety Connections, we invite you to participate in a short survey. This is being collected on behalf of the ministry. Responses are completely anonymous. No personal information is collected. And of course, to participate is an option for you. That said, we will definitely utilize the information in general through the results of the survey to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our participants, this sector, broader workplaces, and the province. Within the chat, we will provide the link as well as the 6-digit code that you will require on opening that page in a browser to complete the survey. I will pause for a moment on this screen, though, if you wish to take the moment to complete the survey. Once again, that information is in the chat if you prefer to return to it later. And thank you for your participation and consideration in the survey. Just a few notes on this platform for purpose of the presentation and Safety Connection. We do recommend that you use your computer audio. There is phone conference available if necessary, and whether audio or otherwise, where you may encounter challenges with technology, the fail-safe, in my experience, we invite you to leave the meeting and return using the same link to correct the issues that may have come about. You will notice that both your audio and video are controlled by this meeting. Your microphone will remain muted and your video will remain off. However, your chat and some other functions are available for you to contribute to the discussion. You do have access to reactions to give us a thumbs up along the way, as well as the chat. And we will certainly use the chat for a few purposes throughout the meeting. And in particular, at the end of the meeting, we will attend to the questions and situations that you may wish to discuss with Suzanne and I. Of course, if it is a very specific situation that might require some follow-up, we will commit to do that to truly understand the context of the question that you may have. Teams does offer you with accessibility features as well. You will notice the opportunity to apply captions as well as adjust the view for this meeting. The 3 ellipses across the ribbon at the top, as well as the view pane, are accessible for you, just as your other features such as reactions and chat. Overall, the goals for our Safety Connections, including this topic, are to share information from the prevention system to the sector, as well as the sector to the sector. This opportunity allows you to join, of course, from any place, so long as you do have access to this platform, share your experiences, insights, and of course, again, ask those questions and discuss those situations. I will take a moment to better introduce and welcome Suzanne to this session. Suzanne is a provincial specialist with the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. And in this role, which Suzanne will speak better and more to, farming operations, agriculture and services that support the sector are within the portfolio for Suzanne. And I have had the pleasure and opportunity to work closely with Suzanne over the last while in my role as specialized consultant for agriculture. I have passion, sometimes more than perhaps you might expect, for this sector as not only a health and safety professional with workplace safety and prevention services, but as a member of an agriculture community and family for generations over generations. This sector is important not only to me as an individual, to our organization, to our province, and as we certainly know, to the world as a whole. The contribution that agriculture makes is essential. And the purpose for Suzanne and I today in this session with you is to provide you with some insights to navigate your way through and understand not only the health and safety requirements, but some of those better practices to manage exposures in your workplaces or even on your own properties that might not be workplaces, to ultimately protect yourself, your employees, members of your family and community, as well as your operation and workplace as a whole. With that, I will invite Suzanne to begin our conversation as you share within the chat, perhaps, what type of operation are you joining us from? And that will allow us in some way, perhaps, to tailor this discussion as Suzanne and I will begin. Is it a greenhouse? Is it flower or vegetable? Is it an orchard? Is it a vineyard? Is it a livestock operation of some type? And if so, is it poultry, cattle, or otherwise? So as you share your thoughts, we will begin the conversation with a few of the highlights in our agenda that we will attend to. So we'll take some opportunity to discuss the occupational health and safety system, those requirements as well as better practices that come about from legislation and experiences, in particular, requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations. We will discuss those best practices and we hope contribution from you of your experiences, what works well for you, where are there challenges, and share with you some of the resources available from the ministry, as well as WSPS and other partners within the system. Now, the occupational health and safety system, to begin, involves several partners. The ministry, that Suzanne will share further insight to, of course, is the group that sets standards related to occupational health and safety, including for workplaces such as farming operations. The Workplace Safety and Insurance Board is the insurance provider for those who do have employer-employee relationships and workplaces for most of the sector. And Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, the Health and Safety Association for the sector that provides consulting and training solutions to support you in not only compliance with those requirements that have been set, but also navigate through some of those better practices that may be present. Previously, you may have known WSPS as Farm Safety Association. where I began my career a few years ago. From Farm Safety Association to WSPS, we continue to serve the agricultural sector as a not-for-profit organization, supporting you through health and safety expertise and resources. Our mandate, the reason that I am so happy to go to this workplace every day, is to be sure every individual goes home safe or stays home if on farm already every single day, no matter what has happened throughout that day. That is a little about myself and WSPS, and I thank you for those who have shared within the chat the various types of operations we have here, from greenhouses, nursery production, trees, shrubs, tomatoes, awesome, fruit processing, apples, some livestock as well. Thank you so much, and please do continue to drop in the chat the type of operation as well, any of those questions, situations, or otherwise. And with that, I will welcome Suzanne to continue the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going to take control of the screen here, and there, I think we're all good. So as Kristen said, my name's Suzanne. I've been with the Ministry of Labour now for just over 11 years. So I've been around for a little while. I started as an inspector in the Ottawa area. I did that for 5 years, and I've since moved into this role of provincial specialist, which is a very ambiguous sounding role. But what we do is provide guidance, sort of for provincial in a provincial context, and we engage a lot with our safe work associations like WSPS. So we can sort of drive the program from using data and information from the stakeholders and from our safe work associations. I have had the farming and ag file for just a little over 2 years now, so I feel like I'm still learning to walk with this file. It's a very, very complex industry, as you all well know, but I absolutely love it. And it's I mean, I've had great support from WSPS and from Kristen on the file, and I say this, and Kristen's probably heard me say it recently, but one of the reasons I love this, having this in my portfolio, is because it is such an interesting file. It's not a matter of like, you walk into a factory that looks relatively the same from day to day, and the machines are going to be relatively the same from day to day, and you can say, well, put a guard on that, or lock that out. It's farming and ag are just a totally different beast, so to speak, and really interesting and really, really, really worthwhile health and safety work that goes on in the field. No pun intended. So what I'm going to do today, sorry, I'm going to show you our disclaimer slide. So here's our disclaimer slide that I'll read, that basically says to don't, if you have any questions, to reach out to your legal people directly. You may find that some of the slides are slightly blurry or a little bit out of focus. If I am able to share a copy of this after the presentation. So in the actual copy that you received, they will be clear. It was just some of the technology challenges with having big files. So I do tend to do present, and here's our vision and our mission. So taking pride in strengthening Ontario, its places and its people, and that our focus is to ensure that workers are treated fairly, and that workers come home, as Kristen said, safely at the end of each day, or remain home, as it were. So I do tend to have sort of a conversational style to my presentations, which is a little bit more challenging on a webinar where there isn't interaction with people except in the chat. But bear with me. I do tend to sort of jump around a little bit in my topics. But the most important thing for me today, and I'm sure for you folks who are taking time out of your busy day to join us, is that we talk about things that are actually, pertinent and of interest to you. And my goal is to give you that information. But if there's any questions that come up as I'm speaking, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer. Or if there's even questions that aren't related to what I'm talking about directly, but you're just dying to know and you have someone from the ministry to ask, feel free to add those in as well. So I'm sure that there's sort of a wide range of folks on the call with a wide range of knowledge about the Act and about the ministry. So I apologize if some of this is a little bit sort of, health and safety 101, but just to sort of set the base of what we do at the ministry and what our goal is. So, our overarching legislation is the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it sets out all the powers, requirements, and the rights related to occupational safety in Ontario. We often refer to it as the Green Book. I'm sure everybody's heard someone say, well, what does it say in the Green Book? So the Occupational Health and Safety Act is that Green Book that we go to. And really the idea is to protect workers from workplace hazards, set out rights and duties for all workplace parties, establish procedures when dealing with hazards, and then provide what enforcement looks like should we need to go down that road. We have many regulations under the Act, regulations related to hazards, sort of the miscellaneous ones that talk about training or reporting or things like that, and then our sector regulations. So as many of you are probably often hear of the industrial regulations, so that's the one that is most often talked about in and around farming operations. So there's the farming sector regulation, regulation 414. And that is it is a sector regulation, but not quite the same as the sector regulations like mining and construction and industrial, where those regulations actually set out how, what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and then how to basically what's expected for compliance. Like construction has a large section on working at heights and all the things that need to be in place for working at heights, guardrails and lanyards and, travel restraints, etc. The farming reg is a little bit different, because the farming reg basically just says the Act applies, and it also outlines what regulations apply under the Act, which is, I believe, 4 at this time, maybe 5 when you count the washroom one. But so the farming regulation is not prescriptive in the same way that the other regulations are. And then there's also like I said, the hazard regulations. So those speak specifically to confined space, needle safety, x-rays, things like that. And as most of you know on the call, all of those hazard regulations actually don't apply to farming, with the exception of noise. So here's sort of just a bit of a repeat of what I just said. So up until 2006, farming was exempt from all occupational health and safety regulation and legislation. So the regulation 414 brought into being that the Act applies, and so Section 1 of 414 says, subject to the limitations and conditions set out in this regulation, the Act applies to farming operations, and that's where the power comes from to give different regulations applicability at farms as well. So if the regulation is not listed in that 414, then it's not applicable at farms. So what does that mean exactly? So this is a question that comes up a lot, sort of in our life as inspectors and when things are reported to us. So when does the Occupational Health and Safety Act actually apply to farms? And the easy answer is when there's a paid worker. So if there's anybody on the farm who's paid, getting monetary compensation, then that becomes a workplace that is under our jurisdiction at the Ministry of Labor. I have the definition of a worker from the Act that falls, so it has to meet the definition in the Act of a worker. And in this case, it's someone who performs work or supplies services for monetary compensation. And then it goes into a few of the examples where there is people working under work programs. So that actually didn't used to be part of the definition until probably 4 or 5 years ago. But due to incidents that happened in Ontario, we realized it was a gap, and that students who were at workplaces not receiving monetary compensation, but working under one of the post-secondary high school programs for work experience co-op programs that they are covered by the Act. Volunteers are not covered by the Act in most cases. Just making sure I'm not missing anything there. So the interesting thing with farming that makes it different from a lot of our different businesses is that the OHSA, or the Occupational Health and Safety Act, may not apply year round. It will only apply when there's paid workers. So the paid workers don't necessarily have to be on site for it to apply, but if there's people who are being paid, at the time of the visit or the incident, then the Act will apply. But if you're talking about, January through the end of February, there's no paid workers on payroll, then we would have no jurisdiction on that location at that time. Domestic partnerships, couples who are taking a profit from the farm, we generally don't consider those paid workers. We consider them owner operated. But if there's other family members outside of that domestic partnership, then that would be considered, that we do consider those people workers. So here's the regulations that apply to farming. Like I said, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so 4 that currently apply to farms. The 5th one coming into force in January 1st. So the notices and reports under section 51 to 53 of the Act. So fatalities, critical injuries, occupational illnesses, and other incidents. So if you have a critical injury or a God forbid, fatal injury on a farm, then you do fall under our mandatory reporting for those things, as well as occupational illnesses. And occupational illnesses are defined as, and many of you may be slightly triggering because it will remind you of the COVID days, but where many workplaces learned about occupational illness reporting. But OC illnesses are illnesses that are caused from a biological, chemical, or physical source at a workplace. For which either there's diagnosed illness or there's been a claim made to WSIB for that illness. So noise-induced hearing loss would be an example of one that would fall under that. COVID during the COVID days fell into that. Measles would be one if it's acquired at the workplace. So if it's acquired at home, then it wouldn't be reportable to us. But if it's acquired at home, someone comes to the workplace and then 4 other workers end up sick because of it, then it would be reportable to us. The noise regulation is it sets out the noise limits that workers can be exposed to, or beyond which they cannot be exposed to. Occupational health and safety awareness training. So that's that training, health and safety in 4 steps for workers and 5 steps for supervisors, or I don't know if I have the number of steps right, but that online training that you can do, or the booklet training for anybody who employs workers who English or French is not their first language. The booklets are available in, I believe, 11 different languages through the awareness training portal. So I can put the email for that in the chat a little later on if anybody's interested. But they do have both worker and supervisor booklets available in because I'm pretty sure it's 11 different languages. The naloxone kit regulation, and that one's a funny one. It caused a lot of consternation when it was rolled out because it's one of those ones that's a little bit challenging. So the naloxone regulation says that employers must have naloxone kits available at workplaces where there's a known risk of a opioid overdose. It doesn't mean that every farm needs to have one or that every workplace in Ontario needs to have one. But if there's a known risk that a worker may be exposed to an overdose of an opioid, then it's a requirement. So we have actually another good reference on that I can put in the chat too if there's any questions about that. And then finally, the one that's not in force yet is the washroom facility one. So that one says that records of cleaning for washrooms that are provided for employees must be available and maintained for a certain amount of time and available for review by inspectors. I put a link there to the maintaining clean washroom facilities for workers because I think it's another one that's actually often sort of misunderstood or not clearly communicated on our part. And I printed off the section of the regulation of the Act where we talk about washroom facilities. And I was going to just read it out so it's clear what they mean. So for the employer duty to provide washroom facilities, it says an employer shall ensure that the washroom facilities, if any, that are provided by the employer for the use of workers are maintained in clean and sanitary conditions. So I just want to note that it says the employer shall ensure that washroom facilities, if any, that are provided for the by the employer for the use of workers. So it's not mandatory for the employer to provide washrooms. It's mandatory to provide clean washrooms if you have provided them. The other thing to note that's really important, and I think it's probably something that we have not done a great job at the Ministry of communicating, is that this does not apply to private residences. So it doesn't apply to bunkhouses, for instance. We don't have any authority in a bunkhouse. We can't go in and check for clean washrooms, and we certainly can't demand a record of cleaning. And it also applies for farmhouses. So if a farm operator allows workers access to their personal space to use the washroom, it's also an area where we have no jurisdiction, and we wouldn't consider that part of this washroom record of cleaning facilities. If you have a large greenhouse and you have washroom provided within a greenhouse for workers, then it's then that regulation would apply. Okay, so joint health and safety committees. That's the other thing that that regulation 414 denotes for that's different for farming than every other industry in Ontario. So in that farming reg, it says that if you have one of these 6 types of farms, then you're required to have a joint health and safety committee. So only if you have one of these 6 types of farms, so mushroom, greenhouse, dairy, hog, cattle, or poultry. So those 6 commodities, you're required to have a joint health safety committee if you have 20 or more workers on site. You're only required to have certified members if there's 50 or more workers employed regularly at the farm, which is different from normally it would be if you required a committee, then you're required to have certified workers. But for those 6 commodities, you're only required to have a certified worker if there's more than 50 workers employed regularly at the farm. So the sort of other side of that is if you're not listed, if you have a farm and you're not one of those farms, then you're not required to have a joint health and safety committee, regardless of whether or not you have, 20, 200, or 2,000 workers. If you're not one of those 6 farming commodities, then you're not required to have a joint health and safety committee, and then by virtue of that, not required to have anybody certified. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to skip ahead. So the other question we get a lot is, does the construction project apply on farms? And this is, again, something that's often being misunderstood in the industry. So because we say, well, only the regulations listed in the farming regulation apply on farms, that this construction regulation does not apply because it's not listed. So for clarification, it absolutely does apply if there's something on the farm that meets the definition of a construction project. So I just included those 2 definitions there for reference. But so if you're building a new greenhouse, if you're building a new facility, the construction regs absolutely apply during the construction of that facility. So if there is construction on a farm, we stop calling it a farm, we start calling it a construction project. So just for the duration of that project, that they would apply, that regulation would apply, which includes the expectation for workers to have working at heights training. We do have, just as a quick note, like there are some farming operations that don't fall under our jurisdiction that have paid workers, and those would be ones that fall under the federal jurisdiction. So typically feed mills, seed cleaning mills, including pesticide additives, flour mills, and grain elevators along the Great Lakes, typically are under the federal regulation, not our regulation. So we have no jurisdiction on those types of operations. I keep wanting to say any questions, but if you have questions, just type them in and we'll get to them. So the other question that comes up a lot, I'm sure, is something that people are trying to figure out, as are we a lot of the time. If we're at a location, is it a farming operation and the farming reg applies, or is it actually an industrial establishment and then the industrial regs would apply? And generally speaking, if you're growing something, I'll read it from the slide because otherwise I'll screw up the language, but, farming involves the activities related to the growing, raising, harvesting, and preparing of agricultural commodities, plant or animal, for the primary market, including the maintenance of the related equipment. If the activity in question is functionally connected or integral to the farming operation, then the regulation for farming operations may apply. So and I actually go into more detail on the very next. So typically, if it's the growing and sort of basic, picking and packaging and shipping, we consider that a farming operation. Depending on what's going on, if there's a farm market, if things are being if we're making, I think the example that you probably all heard is, changing apples to apple pie, then we consider that part of the location an industrial establishment. The thing I really want to stress is that regardless of whether or not the farming or the industrial regulations apply, the overarching theme is that employers must take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. So, an example that comes up often is guarding. So, if I go into a location and I see that there's a conveyor and there's unguarded pulleys on it, and I write an order, the biggest difference may be where I write that order. So whether or not I write it as a 25-2H, so take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for protection of a worker by guarding this machine, or if I write it under the industrial regulation, section 25 that says that a prime mover must be guarded to prevent worker access. So in farming, we look at the hazard and we try and address the hazard through the section, more often than not, section 25-2H, the general duty clause. Whereas if we were looking at the industrial regulations, we'd be able to pick the section of the regulation that talks to that hazard, lockout or guarding or what have you. But the thing I want to sort of just stress as much as I can is regardless of whether or not the industrial reg applies or the farming reg applies, what the ministry is interested in is the control of the hazards. So when when an inspector goes to a workplace and is trying to sort of determine what regulation is the appropriate regulation to apply, whether or not there's a joint health safety committee needed, that sort of thing, like the questions we sort of actually ask ourselves are, is something being grown? What's being grown? Are the activities in question related to the core agricultural activities, such as the production, growing, raising, cultivation, etc., of crops or agricultural commodities and the preparation of these agricultural commodities for the primary market? Are these activities distinct and separable from or functionally integrated related to the farming operation? So a really good example of that is if someplace that has a big farm market attached to it, is that farm market a separate, distinct entity from the actual farm operation that's involved in the growing? And if that's the case, then we may well separate those two sections into the farm market is industrial and the rest of the farm falls under the farming reg. It's easier to do if one of the questions I think is farther on is like, do people work between the two? So a lot of places, the people who work in the production area or the farm market area don't cross into working into the farm itself, that they may be under one enterprise, but they're two separate groups of personnel and often separate managers and stuff. When that's the case, it makes it easier to separate into different, choose distinct and severable operations. But it does like each of these questions we have to answer, and then from each one sort of falls out more questions. But these are the kind of questions that we would ask to determine whether or not the industrial regs or the farming regs would apply. One of the other things we look into is if there is packaging going on, are you getting all of your items all your produce to be packaged? Is it coming from your location only, or are you bringing in product from 8 or 9 other locations and then packaging them all together? Because then that again changes that if you're using a bunch of different suppliers that are bringing product in, then that leans again towards the industrial side and a little bit away from the just the farming side. So I always like to share court news because I always think it's interesting for just sort of to set the bar for when we're talking about these things. These are they're completed files, they're publicly available. I got these from our website. So the first example there is the Highline Produce Limited in Leamington. It was a commercial mushroom growing farm. A worker in 2023 was critically injured by getting being entangled in the grow net, and they were charged. So the Highline was found guilty pled guilty to failing to provide every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker in a workplace, which is a violation of Section 25(2)(h) of the Occupational and Safety Act. And then it shows the fine and the surcharge. The next one over is Gwillimdale Farms in Bradford, a commercial farm and vegetable washing, grading, and packaging facility where a worker was fatally injured while lubricating the potato line by not ensuring that the line's uptake conveyor was equipped with a guard. The employer failed to ensure that measures and procedures prescribed by Section 25 of the Industrial Establishments Regulation were carried out in the workplace, contrary to Section 25(1)(c) of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So I just wanted to give those two examples because the first one, the high line, the order was written, they failed to take every precaution reasonable, so it was written under the Act 25(2)(h). But the Gwillimdale one was actually written under Section 25 of the industrial regs. You can see a little bit by, they both of them look fairly similar. That's, being caught up in equipment, but the second one was a location that does vegetable washing, grading, packaging, and the worker was injured while lubricating while lubricating the potato line. So it was a more industrial establishment. That section of the farm was deemed to be an industrial establishment. So similar outcomes, but just handled slightly differently. So one of the things when we were talking about this presentation was one of the things we discussed was the fact that sometimes there's a lot of sort of mystery around what it means when an inspector shows up, how to act, what to expect, what would be considered out of the ordinary. So we thought we might just go through a little bit of a precursor to, so an inspector shows up at your location, like what should you expect? What is sort of the normal protocols, that sort of thing. So this is just sort of what to expect during an inspection. There's a picture, my old warrant card and my badge. So inspectors have ID. They all carry a badge and a warrant card. And one of the things is it's somewhere in that blue blurb. But one thing that you can do is you can ask for identification. I think in this day and age, there's more concern about, making sure that people are who they say they are. And it's absolutely okay for you to ask for identification from the inspector. There's, like I said, we are required to carry our badge and our identification on us at all time. We don't generally have it, physically on our being. It's not really the way that we do our business. Like we don't have it displayed. Although I have known a few inspectors in the past who like to wear it on a chain around their neck. But generally speaking, we're not that kind of enforcement agency. But we do have it. Should you want to see it, you're more than entitled to be able to see that. And again, it would be the badge. They've changed a little bit now. That's an older one that just says the Ministry of Labor. Now it's a slightly different logo, but they will also have that warrant card attached to it. So inspectors may call ahead to let you know they're on their way. If you've had an incident, you're probably already expecting them, but if it's a proactive visit, so they're just showing up because you haven't had a proactive visit in a long time or possibly ever, they may call ahead to give you the heads up that they're on their way, that they'll be there that day or even the next day. It's not a mandatory notice. We are able to show up at any time and demand, this is a great word, demand that you take time and talk to us. Hopefully we don't demand too brutally, but we do have that power technically under the Act. We have found, generally speaking, with farms and with farm operations that if we can, we'll do a call ahead. It just, again, because of the operation, because of where people are or may not be, it's easier on everybody if we are able to give you a little bit of advance notice and we can meet you at the proper location. And also find out if there's anything that we need to be aware of, if there's any additional biosecurity, anything that we should know prior to being on site. Labor inspectors are all required to follow biosecurity. We have our own internal biosecurity protocols based on this, standards that are set out by CFIA and by OMAFA. But if there's any additional biosecurity measures at your farm location, we're required to follow those as well. So it's not a case of saying, there are some things that inspectors do have the authority to say, well, I know you make everybody sign in, but I'm not going to sign in because you have my card and you know who I am. I wouldn't necessarily say that was the best way to, create relationships, but for, regardless, inspectors do have the authority to not do some things, but this is something they don't have the authority to not follow. So they are required to follow any biosecurity that is in place at the farm. Upon their arrival, they will state who they are and their purpose for their visit. So whether they're there for an inspection, investigation, or consultation. They will also introduce anybody from who may be with them. So sometimes we travel with an occupational hygienist or an ergonomist or an engineer that has specialized knowledge about whatever we're looking at or going to talk about that day. So they'll introduce any of those people as well. They will always ask for a member of your management team. So they always want to talk to somebody who's in management, and they'll want to talk to the health and safety worker representative or worker member of the committee. So usually in most cases, if it's at all possible, we'll want that worker member to accompany us for the physical inspection. So if it's proactive inspection, so we have two main types of inspection, proactive or reactive, and sort of self-explanatory. But proactive just means that we're there to do a general check. So they're based on whatever our campaigns are. Currently, it's material handling. So an inspector may arrive to see to look at what you're doing for material handling in your workplace. So they always will do an administrative review. So they'll ask questions about your monthly inspections, about your committee or health and safety rep, violence and harassment policies, and they may want to see, your health and safety program and training records. And then we'll do a physical inspection of the workplace. Again, farms are a little bit different than, a factory or a Tim Hortons, where we can sort of know exactly, walk around the whole place in one day. It may not be feasible at a farm. It may not be an appropriate thing to do in a day, but they will, whatever their focus is for that day, they'll want to look at it. So if you have like something related, like I said, to material handling, they'll want to look at that area in particular. They are also required to leave a field visit that outlines what they did during their visit. And actually, that's my next few slides are about field visits. So on the odd time, if they run out of time, they may not leave. They may leave just a one-pager saying, I'm going to come back with a field visit tomorrow or next week or whatever you agree upon. But they always have to leave that record that they were there and who they spoke to and what they did while they were there. This will also be where there's any orders, if there are orders. So these ones are a little bit blurry, so I apologize, but like I said, I'll send Kristen the actual copies of these PDFs so you can have the full copies if you want them just as a reference. But they're also in the presentation and they're clear in the presentation. So this is just what a field visit looks like if you haven't seen one before. So I'm going to change it to my little pointer there. So this is the full field visit, what it looks like. The information at the bottom in this area is the inspector information. So I think in this case, it says Ronnie Lucas, and he's one of our RPCs in the East region. So he created these little documents, these training documents for me. But so you're going to have the section at the bottom that tells you your inspector. It has all their contact information. There's a number at the bottom in bold way down here that says, like, if you've had an experience that you want to share, positive or negative, and in all honesty, probably more people call in if they've had something that has gone sideways than if they really want to report a great experience. But that's okay. That's what it's there for. So if you have any concerns about anything that happens, you can call that number. So this is just an enlargement of this top section of the report. So in this section we have it tells you the case ID and the field visit number, the date. And then this little block here says initial. So if you had subsequent visits, it would say continuation or follow-up, depending on the kind of visit. It'll give you your location, the telephone number, the joint health and safety community status, and the workforce. This section here, completed %, that's for our construction folks. So if they're going to a site, they would write how far along the construction project is in its how much is being completed. So basically, unless you're doing construction, you'll never see that filled out on an industrial or farming visit. So, and then persons contacted. Typically, inspectors will clearly identify so this person would be production manager, so they clearly identify who the manager was and clearly identify who the workers are. The purpose, so conduct an inspection, it may say, conduct an investigation into an incident that was reported. So typically it's pretty vague there, where they visited. So again, in farms, this is really important. It tells you exactly, like, the office in the broiler house, or, again, at Tim Hortons, if you would say the, customer area and the kitchen or the back. But with farming, it's really important that part's clear, because we will very rarely be in every nook and cranny of a farm. So you want to make sure that you identified where it was that we were. And the inspector will likely ask you to describe the places we were, so we get the language right. And then the visit summary, this section will tell you whether or not orders were issued. Then there's what's called the detailed narrative, and don't worry, I'm not going to read this to you. But so this is the area. If it's proactive, which is the one that this is mimicking, it will talk about what our campaign is about and give you some information about where you can get more information, or how to report incidents, things like that. And again, that's just a bit more of the same. So inspector information. At the bottom here, these two sections, so it says recipient, I believe, there, and then worker representative here. So at the end of the field visit, when the inspector is presenting this field visit to you, the inspector will go through the field visit, and then at the end of it, they'll ask for signatures from the manager rep, which is generally a recipient, and then the worker. And so you fill out name, title, and sign, and everybody signs the bottom. A copy is left with the workplace, and then a copy is taken back to our office for filing. So this is the one that I want to spend a little bit more time on, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm not talking. I always talk too much, so I'll make sure that I speed up a little bit. But so this is what the order page looks like when you're dealing with a field visit. So sorry, trying to change my cursor back, and I can't talk and change things at the same time. So if you get orders, this is sort of I just wanted to go through what they look like. So at the very top is going to be that repeat of the case and the field visit number, and then the location, who the order is written to. So in this case, and in 99% of the cases, you would see the order is being written to the primary employer. So that's the farm operator, the organization or corporation that is the employer. Occasionally you'll see this, and it will be supervisor or worker. So if someone went to a workplace and a worker wasn't wearing their I'll just use the construction for ease of example. So that they're at a construction site and they're not wearing their hard hat, and there may be orders written to the employer, but there may be also orders written to the supervisor and to the worker. So there are times where we'll write orders to different people, but 99% of the time you're going to see the orders written to the employer. And then you can see there's an order type, a quote code given, and these tell you what kind of order it is. So time U is time unknown, stop is a stop work, fort, it means forthwith, and time means time-based. And you can see the circle in blue shows you what section of the regulation it's written under. So if you wanted to, look online or pull out your copy of the Green Book and read exactly what that section is, that's the section of the regulation that's being written under. So it's under the Act, section 25(1)(b). So, and here's an example of what that order might be written, how the order may be written. So section 1B in the Act says, 25(1)(b) says that the employer must maintain equipment in good condition. Basically, that's the section, maintain and repair equipment in good condition. So what that order looks like in this case is the employer shall ensure that the guards for the tail end of the feed auger in the main broiler house provided by the employer are maintained in good condition. The guards on both sides of the tail end of the feed auger had been removed and could not be immediately reinstalled as they were damaged. So it's identifying who has to do it. The employer has to do it. What the problem is that the guards have been removed from the tail end from both sides of the tail end of the feed auger, and that it couldn't be done immediately. So the second order number 2, is the stop work order. So this order says the feed auger in the main broiler house shall not be used until the order number blah, 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 which is the one above, regarding maintenance of the feed auger safeguards has been complied with. So whenever you have a time you order or a stop order, they're always going to be connected. So we're not telling you when it has to be done by, but we're telling you can't use it until it is done, and you tell us when it's done, and then we'll lift the stop work. So it's a little bit confusing, but with every stop work order, there's a linked time unknown order. The forthwith orders, those ones are the ones where I go in and I see something. I go in as an inspector and I see something. The example there is that there's a hazard of electrical shock. The cover of the feed auger sub panel had been removed, exposing workers to live electrical. Order complied with immediately as the cover was reinstalled. So that means I saw something that was in non-compliance and we fixed it while I was there. So it's still recorded as a non-compliance, but it's done. There's no further action required on your part. And then the last one, which is probably the most common order, are the time-based orders. So this one says the employer shall cause a joint health and safety committee to be established and maintained in the workplace. A joint health and safety committee has not been established in the poultry farm where there's more than 20 workers. So the inspector has established this poultry farm, so that the joint health safety committee is required if there's over 20 and that it has not yet been done. And then there's a comply date for it. So there's always going to be a date associated with that you need to comply by. 99% of the time, the inspector will work with the employer, the farm operator, to discuss, okay, this is what we need you to do. What's a reasonable time frame? When can you foreseeably get that done by? Very rarely is it not a discussion between all the workplace parties on that one. And this again is more probably for reference if you look at this after the fact, but this is just a summary of the different types of orders that we have that may be given at the during a field visit. So we talked about forthwith. Plan is another one. So plan is when a contravention is identified, and the contravener must submit a plan on how they are going to comply with the order. Typically, that's in something that's a really big project. So say we bring in our occupational hygienist and we have an inspector and we're like, yeah, the air exchange in here is not sufficient. We need to figure out how to keep, whatever contaminants at a lower level, and we need to improve indoor air quality. So we need to have the entire, and this is a very rare order to be written, but we need to have the entire HVAC system needs to be replaced. So assuming that there's not an imminent hazard to life and limb, we're going to want to plan on how you're going to do that. So, so the employer can then take it back, investigate what the best steps are to go to comply with whatever the issue is, and then develop a plan and a timeline, submit that to the inspector, and then it's reviewed on our side and by our specialized services, and determine whether or not that meets the intent of the order, and that's it. So for like complex things, we may ask for a plan. Also, things that we want to make sure that whatever you're complying with, that you're not off, for lack of a better way of saying it, that you're not off base with the solution. So we don't want to have an employer spend tens of thousands of dollars addressing an issue that doesn't really address the initial concern. So we want that. So that's when we use plan orders. So complex, long time frame, or something that could have a large cost associated with it, that we want to make sure that it is meeting the intent of the regulations, that there's no time or money wasted on something that doesn't then end in compliance. A requirement is the other thing that comes up quite a lot, and many of you've had visits from the ministry, you've probably seen these. So requirement is a legal direction issued under the Act to provide information as specified by the inspector. So oftentimes what they will require is something like an engineering report. So if there's been an upgrade to a piece of equipment and we aren't sure whether or not it's a safe upgrade or a safe change, we want to make sure that whatever has changed is reasonable and safe and permissible by the manufacturer, et cetera. We may require an engineering report on whatever that may be. They may require like documentation on pesticides for our occupational hygienist to review, things like that. So that's a requirement, is to provide some kind of documentation. I think that covers those. the other thing you'll have with your field visit is a notice of compliance. So this is how inspectors sort of close the loop on compliance. So you may the inspector may come back. So certainly for stop works, they typically do come back and lift the stop work order in person so they can see that whatever the order was complied with. But for time-based orders, things like, you know, the establishment of a committee, the employer can just submit the notice of compliance. And the way you do that is, I'm just going to change back to my pointer. So it tells you how to return it. So you can do it by you can do it by fax. So you can still find a fax machine, have at it, but you can also do it by email. And you can do it by mail actually as well. But if you were to return it, what you would do is you'd go through each order, you'd write the comply by date. So when compliance was achieved, what was done. So I'm just going to skip the 1 and 2 because that's the stop work. But the number 4 there, you'll notice there's no number 3 because that number 3 was a forthwith, so it was already dealt with. There's no further action. Number 4, you would write established committee with a worker rep and a management rep, and then the date. And then this section, which is the really important section, is where your worker member of, so either your joint health and safety committee worker member or worker representative checks agree and then signs it. And that's how we go back to the internal responsibility system where we want the employer and the workers to be working together. And if you, if the workplace parties, if you both agree that it's complied with, we accept that as compliance in most cases. If there's some reason that we need, like I said, for stop works, we usually follow up because we have to lift the order. But it's one way, so the inspector doesn't need to go back to the workplace to verify compliance. They can use the notice of compliance to do it. Okay, so for the last few slides I have for you today is I just thought, I always find these things interesting. Hopefully you do too, that, you know, so what does it look like at the ministry for our farming and agricultural services field activities? So this is actually a broad range. So it's 5 years, and then part of the 6th year. Actually, I guess that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, part of the 7th year, excuse me. So it's 2019 to 2024, and then what we have so far of 2025. And I always think it's an interesting slide to include the COVID days, because you can certainly see during 2020 and 2021, we had a huge increase in visits to farming locations because of the outbreak and because of trying to share infection control information and whatnot. So so we went from 750-ish in 2019 to up to 1,300-ish for 2020 and 2022. It came down again in 2023, and then came down a little bit more in 23 and 24. And so far in 2025, it looks like we're going to be higher than 24, but likely not higher than 23. So there's a little bit of a downward trend in recent years. The number of workplaces visited. So sometimes if you're wondering why, so there was 358 workplaces visited, but 748 field visits, because there are some locations that will be visited multiple times. So if there was a fatality or a workplace injury where an inspector is investigating, they may have gone back to the same workplace multiple times. So that's why those numbers aren't equal. Also, sometimes it's just for compliance purposes. They'll go back, they may go back and they may go in and look at a piece of equipment and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to need to bring back my engineer for this because I'm not sure what exactly we should be doing about that. So there's multiple visits that way too. The number of orders issued is this line here. Again, if you look at sort of the orders per field visit, during COVID, although there were a lot of field visits, our order number actually weren't super high. Comparatively, it's clearly like significantly less than 1 order per workplace. But then when you look at 2025, you're looking at more orders than field visits. So we're going into places less, but maybe writing more orders or requirements that we have than we did during earlier days. The number of stop work orders is there just more for interest's sake, and then events. So when we talk about events, it means something that was called into our call center. So that includes everything from fatal injuries to complaints about temperature, to work refusals, to reprisals, any of those things that would be called into us at the Ministry of Labor. So that's what events are. And again, if the events are often COVID was, COVID days, there was definitely an increase, but again, they've sort of stabled out again to in the 200, low 200s, mid to low 200s. And I think events are not necessarily events don't necessarily tell you that much, depending on what the event is. If we have work refusals, it's actually a sign of the IRS actually functioning to some extent. So I don't see work refusal as necessarily a negative thing. But then obviously injuries, we would prefer to see downward trends when it comes to injuries. Here are the number of events just by the year for the last few years. You can see the occupational illness has dropped right off. So this would have been still part of the COVID illnesses being reported to us primarily. What you're seeing in these 2s and 4s here are likely. So we get dermatitis is a illness that's often reported to us. We have had measles, and we have had noise-induced hearing loss. So those are sort of the ones that we get outside of the COVID reports. Those are not atypical farming illness reports that we get. Sorry, I'm just trying to have a look here, see if there's anything that jumps out at me. I do find it interesting, and Kristen's heard me say this probably a dozen times, but it always fascinates me when we end up with years that we get the exact same number of things. It just seems funny to me that out of all of the workplaces in all of Ontario and all the farming and ag services, that we would have exactly 77 injuries reported to us 2 years in a row. I always find that sort of an oddity, but I did double check that was correct. This I included just because I thought it was interesting, and I perhaps again it sort of gives us an idea of where we should maybe be focusing some of our energies. So when we look at the critical injuries in 2025, so calendar year 2025 up to mid-October, I included this slide to show like the different kinds of things that are causing critical injuries. And the one you see that this sort of the tallest one here, that's 5, is falls when exiting equipment. So that's something that I think is really an interesting one, and something we've talked about a lot in the transportation industry of getting in and out of transport trucks and things like that. That it's sort of in a way a simple thing, you think, but maybe it's something we could start looking into a little bit more about, education campaigns or things like that there's that, studies that show that the vibration in farming equipment that you're sitting in can kind of numb your senses a little bit or slow your senses. So that combined with fatigue, combined with, large steps and awkward positioning, can really lead to incidents. And it sounds like a minor thing, but if you misstep and end up with a severe break, it's a pretty serious impact to you personally and to your business. So again, sort of interesting, here if I just do tree, like being struck by trees, fall from a tree during tree removal, we are seeing an increase in incidents related to tree removal on farms. So that's something that we may be focusing a little bit more energy on in the coming days as well. I'll just leave that up there for a second for people to look at. I don't think I have anything else really of any note to say there. And then the final slide, which is always the sort of one that we wish we could see, a positive trend in, but unfortunately in 2025 we certainly have not, is the number of farm and ag sector fatalities. So we have for some reason had quite a jump in 2025. We're at 7 already this year. And these only are talking about fatalities involving paid workers who are fatally injured during their course of work. So this does not include those, children who are not working but are at a farm, or a family member being killed at a farm, or an owner operator with no paid workers being killed. So these are just the ones that are considered occupational fatalities. We are still seeing a huge number of struck by incidents. So when we say struck by, we mean struck by equipment or material generally. So crush is getting sort of pinned between things, whereas struck by is getting, struck by a falling piece of equipment, struck by a moving, a vehicle, things like that. Fall from height was, in 2022 and 23 were primary ones, but we've gone back to the struck by and crush in the last couple of years. And that's all I have for you today. So I put my personal email in the chat as well. So WebOsh is our general web address that you can use for any sort of general questions or information about things, sort of big picture ministry of labor, what we can provide. But if you do have questions and you want to just reach out, I'm more than happy to do what I can. I might be able to point you in the right direction or answer. If it's a question I can answer it for you. And that's it for me. Kristen, I'll let you take back over. And please put questions in the chat. I'm happy to take any questions.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Suzanne. And I'll reinforce that request that we do have a Q&A period with Suzanne, that we welcome you in the chat to share those questions where they might be specific situations. We might need further context and follow up, but we still welcome those thoughts within the chat so that we can begin that follow up. That said, many of the questions that have come to WSPS, Suzanne was so kind to attend to within the presentation to this point. So as you consider questions that you may have for Suzanne and I will take us forward just in a little further content and resources, and then we will have that Q&A in just a moment. So the theme that Suzanne did guide us through for a portion of the content certainly is that need to take every precaution reasonable. Perhaps especially within this sector, given that the regulations are not that type that we find in other workplaces, such as industrial establishments, that give us a prescription or step-by-step of how to some extent, protect an individual from a hazard or control an exposure within the workplace. So in order to further protect within the workplace yourself, your family, your employees, as well as your operation and the sector as a whole, it is necessary to take every precaution reasonable, which requires us to understand what the hazards are within the workplace and then how to control, address, or manage those hazards effectively. And often those controls may be that we remove the hazard or exposure, we adjust distance or duration of exposure to that hazard, or we might employ solutions such as engineering, design, personal protective equipment, communication and training, warning signals of some type. And more often, the effective controls, if not elimination, are some type of combination of that variety. So as we recognize and understand the hazards in our workplace, then implementing those strategies to mitigate those hazards, reduce that likelihood and severity of the results due to exposure. Within your workplaces, to demonstrate that as employers through to workers, we are reasonable and implement not only the specific requirements, but take every precaution reasonable. Communication through the internal responsibility system. Share the information throughout the workplace from employer to supervisor to worker, as well from worker to worker and worker to supervisor to employer. The hazards that we recognize, the suggestions that we may have to effectively manage those exposures. Encourage reporting, provide opportunities for individuals to share that information with the supervisor and employer, perhaps as well the health and safety representative and joint health and safety committee, especially your worker member. Document and record. Paper does, figurative or literal paper, does become important to demonstrate that we did communicate or inspect, perhaps implement a control and evaluate its performance. And some of the time, that paper is one part of evidence to demonstrate our reasonableness in the workplace. And some of the time, that paper does tell the story, perhaps, of those who may not be present to do so. Where we do have opportunities in smaller groups between supervisors and the workers within their groups to have informal as well as somewhat more formal conversations, safety talks, tailgate or toolbox talks, do record those efforts as simple as the when, what, and who were involved. And if in that moment that is on a paper template that our supervisor receives from the employer, or it is a note entered into their electronic device that will become entered into a reporting system eventually. Great tools for those, especially who manage our smaller groups in multiple locations, to have to support that duty to take every precaution reasonable, which ultimately is what we would describe as our due diligence in the workplace. Be proactive to recognize and effectively control the exposures within our workplace and support our internal responsibility system effectively. Now, some of the resources that are available within the prevention system and beyond that support us to demonstrate that due diligence, especially since we do not have those specifics within the regulations for farming, such as the topic of guarding, as Suzanne alluded to. We still do have that duty or responsibility of reasonable precaution. So how do we know what might be reasonable? Beyond the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the regulations that do apply, we do have guidelines, standards, and better practices in the sector. Some of those resources to note are within the ministry resources. The ministry years ago has prepared a guide to the Occupational Health and Safety Act for farming operations, a guide for those who are health and safety committees, as well as worker representatives at these operations. And then the one that may be of particular interest for specifics to some extent are health and safety in farming operations as the title. Within this set of guidelines, topics including self-propelled farm equipment and tractors in particular, animal handling, slips, trips, and falls. On that point of machine safety, guarding, and lockout, there is a guideline related to recognition of the machine hazard and reasonable solutions to control the energy to that machine through lockout. Hazardous atmospheres, confined spaces, our bins, silos, and other spaces not designed for us to stay within and with atmospheric hazard, as well as occupational illness. And some of those examples that Suzanne shared with us in this session, certainly some of the description within these guidelines of infection control and prevention within our farming operations. And then personal protective equipment, or PPE, the various types, as well as the hazards and exposures that those types may be reasonable as one type. Perhaps not the only, but one type of control to manage those exposures. So certainly these resources would be reasonable to review, understand, and implement within our operations to demonstrate that due diligence that has been taken. Beyond the ministry resources, do consider the other sector requirements that may be reasonable for your operations, such as guarding requirements that we may find within the regulations for industrial establishments, or working at height requirements to some extent that we may find within guidance for projects such as those we find on construction sites. It may not be that perfect fit, and hence it is not a part of the current regulations for farming operations, but are there points within those requirements that would be reasonable for us to consider and determine if we could implement, and if we could, to do so certainly ultimately for management of those exposures to hazards and risks. Now, beyond the ministry resources as well, within the prevention system, the health and safety associations have a variety of resources, and within WSPS, from the consulting and training solutions to specifically the resources found within our agriculture and horticulture safety center. Here you will find posters and safety topics, videos and templates relevant for the broader sector, and then maybe filtered down by type of subsector or commodity. Greenhouses, as an example. Arboriculture does fall within our mandate as well, and that point of tree removal and some of the resources you may find here. Noting as well that some of our resources are available in multiple languages, including English, Spanish, and others. And we always look for that feedback as to what are the pertinent and common languages within the workplaces where translation may become opportunities. So we welcome you to share that information with us as well. Now, this is a snip of the main landing page for our Agriculture and Horticulture Safety Center, and within it, that curated set of topics from the beginning, getting started, such as some themes within this discussion, as well as those progressing along, implementing communication, training, and recording strategies with templates that are available. I will highlight as well that we do have in communication a podcast focused in on farm safety that will generally share a seasonal, so timely and relevant topic for the sector, and whether it is for the grain operation or the greenhouse operation, around the schedule of the seasons, certainly topics that hit all of our commodities. On that point of the getting started, but also as a bit of an evaluation for you as you progress with health and safety in the sector, we do have, at request in particular from this sector, tools such as checklists to support you. For instance, an employer due diligence checklist, that reasonable precaution theme that we have discussed. How do you know if you have demonstrated that due diligence? This provides you with the beginning of an evaluation. And further to that, from the family farm orientation to the workplace orientation, where we have employers and employees, some basic checklists on requirements that are applicable for these operations to evaluate your current state, as well as identify where there may be opportunities for improvement or further development. I also would like to highlight for a moment that this session is essentially the first in a series of information and safety connections. And this being our online will be followed by 2 in-person safety connections. And at this point, We are within the south and west region of the province. And of course, depending on the feedback, the opportunity to travel across the province as we go. So currently we do have an in-person scheduled in Leamington next week on November the 6th, an in-person scheduled in Vineland on November the 25th. At these sessions, we will build upon the discussion from today with a regional representative from the ministry. And that regional representative will build upon some of the points shared by Suzanne today from the provincial perspective to understand what are the experiences within that part of the region, the types of events the ministry responds to, as well as some of that regional data. What are the types of incidents or trends that we are seeing within the South and the West from the ministry perspective? As well, a representative from WSPS that is regional at each of those events to network with. So I encourage you, if it is local for you, although here today, do join us at the in-person session for some local flavor. As we move into the Q&A, I will invite you again beyond the couple of question marks that I do see in the chat so far to share your feedback as well as post questions that you may have for Suzanne and I in the time that remains before our end at noon. And of course, if not within this session, both of us through contact information and otherwise are available to support you as you go. Now, as we have a look back through the chat, and Suzanne, I'll welcome you if you wish to join on camera and audio. Again, thank you for sharing your direct contact information and some response related to the health and safety awareness training resources that are available, and the resources that we will share with you from Safety Connection will include the highlighted resources that you have seen throughout the presentation, as well as some additional and contact information for follow-up related to slides, as an example that Suzanne offered to share, in particular the field visit training documents. So the links in one page are exactly what will arrive to you from Safety Connection following this session. And the next question that I see here to begin, the new bathroom regulations coming in effect in 2026. How long do those records need to be kept? Suzanne, do you mind that question now or later?
I can do that now. It's funny. This is a copy of the regulation. I knew someone was going to ask about it, and I can never remember it off the top of my head. So, it actually says a record of the cleaning of the washroom facility as described in section 1 must include the date and time of the 2 most recent cleanings of the washroom facilities. So it's not super clear on how long they have to be kept as far as, you know, how many weeks or months, but you need to have at least the last 2 cleaning available for inspection available for review by an inspector. It's a very I'll keep that to myself. Sorry. So yeah, it does say that you have to keep and maintain records and make them available for review by an inspector. That they need to be posted. The record is posted at a conspicuous location in or near the washroom. That if it's posted electronically, it has to be accessible by all workers, and that the record of cleaning must include the date and time of the last 2 most recent cleanings. So really all the inspector can ask for is the most recent cleanings, the 2 most recent cleanings, but for due diligence, I would say you'd want to keep, you know, is sort of define in when you decide on that, how you're going to do that in your workplace, that you'd keep a month in records or some, you know, decide internally what your reasonable amount is. But the regulation itself says the last 2 cleanings. And I think that's something Kristen and I have talked about is that our goal is to have some sort of like for lack of a better way, like a cheat sheet kind of, something that you can just go and download from us or from WSPS that is a template for for keeping those records. I mean, it's probably easy enough to create one yourself in Excel or Word, but if we can provide that for you, all the better. Um, so that was sort of a backwards answers, but yeah, 2 weeks at a time should be plenty. Just reading the comments. Assuming you clean the bathrooms at more than every 2 weeks.
And I think unfortunate, but perhaps the interpretation then, in order to maintain a clean washroom, that time frame may be dependent on its level of use and so on, right? If we are shut down in an area where there is a washroom for months over the winter, for example, cleaning may not be a requirement at that point, but once we do have that more regular use, that frequency likewise would need to increase. So I could see how the reams of paper could build up when we do have that regular use. So the word for word, the most recent 2, which could be that day and the previous day or the 2 times within that day. But nice to be able to demonstrate it's been in place for longer than just that current day, that bit of due diligence point again, when not so specific. Awesome. Next one, which I think is on the same theme of washrooms, legal requirement in terms of standard, for example, every second day or weekly. And Vivian, please do clarify if I misunderstand. I expect that is how often must you clean? And I'll reinforce that thought. And then Suzanne, please do. The requirement is to maintain it clean. So it will depend on that level of use. If
Yes.
no use, which is how I hope my own at home stays, it does not require that higher frequency. But Suzanne, your perspective on the word for word.
Yeah, so again, really interesting question. And trust me, I'm sure you would love to be a fly on a wall sometimes when we're discussing this with inspectors. Because what's clean? I mean, in all honesty, what my definition of clean is might be different from what Kristen's, might be different from what yours is. So we try and use that reasonable lens, what's reasonable. And it's trust me, inspectors really prefer when we can say, is this machine guarded? No, it's not, versus is this bathroom clean? And most of us didn't go into health and safety to become bathroom police. But that being said, there is no standard. That's a long way of saying there's no standard that we have, no legal standard saying, how often is as often as necessary. Again, I was an inspector. I'm not currently an inspector. I do think, and yeah, someone says common sense, and that's that. Vivian said common sense. Like that's what we would go to. What's reasonable, like sort of the common sense lens. And I know that's probably cold comfort to a lot of people because they like, how do we know the inspector has the same common sense that I have? But it is not some, I would think that would have to be quite easily recognizable as being not maintained in a clean and sanitary condition for it to be something that would raise the spidey senses of the inspector that there was something that needed to be addressed in an order. But yeah, it is, I would say, like a reasonable standard. So if you have a greenhouse where you have 50 people using the washroom, you probably would have to clean it much more regularly than if you were at a place where you had 3 people who shared a washroom, 3 days a week. So really your own best guess is better than what I can tell you.
That's great. Thanks, Suzanne. And I'll just reinforce that the revision to legislation or update to legislation to clean washrooms, if washrooms are provided, is in force as of now. What does change as of January 1st, 2026 is that requirement for the record. So there is the responsibility of the employer as of now, midpoint this year, to provide clean washrooms, and then the paperwork that will follow at the start of next year. And I think this is another good example of the conversation to demonstrate reasonableness, just as you would the type of training that you provide or how you do guard access to a moving part on a machine. It is not prescribed. So determine what is reasonable ultimately for protection of people, and having that conversation through your internal responsibility system, as well as with an inspector from the ministry if they do attend the workplace. So thank you for those questions, Suzanne. With just a minute left, if I could ask one that does come up to us often, and it might be a longer answer than the 1 minute, but just your initial take. How should a health and safety representative or a worker member of a joint health and safety committee be selected in the workplace, given that it may not be a role that people throw up many hands for or line up to do? Any take on what's reasonable?
I can give you the official answer and the real answer. The official answer is the health and safety representative or work member of the committee must be a worker who does not exercise managerial functions, who is chosen by the workers. So that's the official answer. The worker member has to be chosen by the workers and cannot exercise managerial functions. The unofficial answer is sometimes that's really, really hard to achieve. So we understand that sometimes employers have to volunteer people to become the worker members, the worker representatives. And if that's the case, what we want to see at the ministry is that you made some effort to have the workers choose a worker. If that did not come to fruition, then select somebody and then put it to the workers to say, this person is going to be the health and safety representative. Is there anybody who has any concerns, or is there anybody who would like to do it who we have not considered? And sort of show that you've sort of done your due diligence that way. Although we can't appoint, we can sort of, the employer has some authority to make something part of someone's duties. Technically not the way it's supposed to work, but sometimes it's just the sort of the nature of the beast, especially if you have someone who is like, you have a worker who does not exercise managerial functions, but they work at your workplace for the entire year. They've worked there for 6 years. They know the equipment, they know the people, they know the processes. Sometimes if there's no volunteers and the workers aren't choosing someone, sometimes being able to like I said, so do the voluntold of having that person take over the role and do the workplace inspections and be the person that workers can go to. It makes more sense than well, again, it is a requirement that the employer must have this. It is a duty of the employer to have this person in place. So sometimes that to me is the more important part than the than the worker chosen by the workers to exercise the function if you can't get people to fill that role. So ideally, in a perfect world, it would always come from the workers. If it can't come from the workers, it's still an employer duty to make sure that role is filled. So sometimes it has to be done a little bit more authoritarian than it needs to, than you'd want it to be. But I hope does that answer, Kristen? Is there any follow-up to that, or is that?
That's great. And the only additional point that I will add is, as an employer, ensure that we are clear on what that role involves. Often there is a concern on the part of the worker that they become more accountable or responsible to manage all of health and safety in the workplace, and be very clear that that is not their role. There is an internal responsibility system apart from that role as a committee or a representative. So thank you so much. And it's great one day for some who might want to be a health and safety professional like Suzanne. So with all of that, thank you for remaining with us for those extra minute or so. Our follow-up will include our contact information. And once more, thank you so much to you, Suzanne. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.